It's been a while, but Formula One philosophy is back for a much needed Belgian Grand Prix recap and Hungarian Grand Prix recap. I'm sorry we haven't been releasing episodes the last little while. Sean and I have been in the midst of some scheduling conflicts, but I will be flying solo today to recap, and while Sean takes a much needed summer break of his own. We got some other episodes coming up for you soon. We got our summer series that we did last year coming up in a week or two, depending on when we can release that. But look forward to a lot of content coming in the next month. Formula One might be off, but we're not off. And yeah, this is a much needed recap to talk about a whole bunch of things that are going on in Spa, a whole bunch of things in the news. Hopefully I can touch on that today. As always, F1_philosophy at Instagram and F1philosophypod at gmail.com to leave any comments, any questions you have for us. We're at F1 Philosophy at YouTube. I have a comment I actually want to touch on later. But yeah, in the meantime, I'll, like I said, flying solo today, just Nick today. I'm going to do my recap and see what comes out of that, and by that I mean Sean probably strangling me for hours at a time based on what I say, but I want to just remind everybody going in today, whatever I say today is my opinion. It's not necessarily the opinion of the entire podcast, i.e. Sean. So yeah, let's get into it. Let's get into what we saw in Belgium first. Great result by Oscar Piastri. Needed a win. Due for a win, I think, as I said in the previous two episodes, once again, my opinion, Oscar was robbed by his team in Austria and robbed by the FIA in Silverstone. Sean disagrees with that, but be that as it may, I think he'd be way ahead in the championship if all the things went his way, which was just his due. Like, just remember, he gets a yellow flag in Austria qualifying when he's setting a pole lap. Norris then goes out and sets his pole lap, which, as we saw in Belgium, in qualifying, Norris just sort of disappeared in both the sprint and in the sprint qualifying. Showed up in the main race qualifying, but disappeared on the first lap, as I'm about to talk about. Apparently there was a battery issue. Apparently just didn't save his battery properly, whereas Oscar did, but apparently Oscar had the same battery issue, so I don't know what exactly was going on there. If Sean was here, he'd probably pipe in with some engineering reports, but that's not this podcast. But yeah, like, once again, Lando seems to have trouble qualifying unless Oscar is off the track, whereas I think in Spa they were setting up for a rain-soak race. We'll talk about that in a bit, and Oscar didn't set the top time in qualifying, but still took over the race and still won with offsetting strategies. And Lando tried to chase him down and made some big mistakes. And that's the whole reason I'm bringing up the Austria talk and the Silverstone talk. Lando was making mistakes left, right, and center those 2 weekends, whereas Oscar was pretty perfect, except for a yellow flag in Austria qualifying, a errant Alpine, Franco Colapinto, which I may touch on later, slowing him down. And then you had in Silverstone, Oscar took pole, dominating the race, or I guess Max took pole, but Oscar 11 seconds ahead, going into a ridiculous safety car, in my opinion. And then he's given a penalty for allegedly stopping errantly, stopping very strongly, but whatever. Sean and I discussed that in the last episode, so if you want to hear our proper thoughts and proper debates on that, listen to that last episode. I won't touch on it anymore, but I just think Oscar could have easily won 3 in a row, but took a strong result in Spa to show that he's still the championship leader. You had a Lando second. You had a surprise Ferrari on the podium. I think Max probably would have gotten that position, maybe even higher, if it weren't for the rain delay. In fourth, you had Russell apparently having a bad result. In fifth, for Mercedes, he was saying it was one of their worst. This is probably what Mercedes is going to be the rest of the year. They're sort of falling off, as Sean and I talk about in our mid-season recap. With what's going on there, you may see them slip off a bit. Albon with an amazing result to finish 6th for Williams again. stamped themselves back as fifth after Spa, when there was quite a bit of a charge from behind from surprisingly Sauber, and even Racing Bulls is not out of the equation. Haas is still technically not out of the equation. It was getting worrisome for them for a bit. Aston Martin obviously not out of the equation either. And then Liam Lawson with a nice 8th, and Gabriel Bortoleto with a 9th, and Pierre Gasly rounding out the top 10. Good results for Bortoleto and Lawson, who have definitely turned both their seasons around after slow starts. Lawson, I think it may be too little too late because of expectation. But Bortoleto, I think, is just starting to hit a stride. And I'll talk more about him in the Hungary recap, but there's something there. But with Spa, I think the main talking point was first Lewis Hamilton out in Q1 in qualifying, struggling. Antonelli, same thing, struggling. Both had tough weekends. Antonelli under a lot of pressure, and Antonelli was crying after Spa qualifying, which is weird to me, which means Mercedes has been putting pressure on him for the seat in 2026, which would be just absolutely nonsensical. If you ask me, if you spent the entire last 2024 telling us he's the next big thing because of his F4 results in 2023, only to see a lackluster F2 from him. And I think Sean and I talked about last year, he absolutely should have gone to F3 and shown if he had any spunk there. I also talked about this in a preseason podcast where I talked about the rookies, and I said if he is what he is, he'll light up F3, and then you can still put him in F2 in 2025, and then you've developed him properly. You can see the trajectory, right? Like that's the trajectory that Oscar Piastri had, that Bortoleto's having now, that Mick Schumacher had, that Charles Leclerc had, George Russell, Alex Albon, Lando Norris, same thing. Like all of these people had that trajectory. The only ones who skipped F2 to go straight to F1 were Esteban Ocon, Lance Stroll, Max Verstappen. And yeah, and back in the day, it's Michael Schumacher and Senna. Yeah, that back in the day, but in modern days, 2 out of 3 didn't work out. And Max took a while. Remember, Max took 7 years. Which, if you're now putting that pressure on Antonelli now, it's kind of ridiculous, right? He's going through this lull. He started off strong. He's going through a lull. His car's hard to drive. It should be a lot easier for him compared to the other rookies, but it just shows that maybe you did rush him. Maybe he isn't what you thought he'd be. And it's tough times for him right now. And I don't think you give up on him now. I think you have to keep him at least for 2026 and even 2027. You now have to give him the 3-year Franz Tost school, the Franz Tost finishing school. You have to give him a chance to try and catch up, right? And then develop properly, because just giving up on him now and essentially threatening him to the rumors were to ship him off to Alpine for a loan to get Max Verstappen. Like, it seems to have done a number to his psyche. And I'm not saying sign him to help him for the rest of the season. No, I'm just saying, say, hey, whatever happens this year, you're good. Whatever, like, just take the pressure off of him. He's developing. Stand up for him. But Wolff isn't really doing that. He's more saying, yeah, I like George and Kimi. I like the way my drivers are right now. He needs to stand up for him a bit more, I think. But yeah, Lewis Hamilton with a great, a horrible qualifying, but a recovery drive to finish 7th from the pit lane, from some astute strategy from Ferrari for once to go on to slicks early. And it seemed to work out, but it was helped out by the fact that the race was delayed for an hour and a half due to rain. And I think you see a lot of, like, especially Verstappen and the Red Bulls, they were set up for a race in the wet and just sort of fell flat in the dry. And you saw Max had no pace to pass the Ferrari, even though arguably Max's car is the second fastest car on the grid, or the third fastest car. But as a constructor, Max Verstappen is second in terms of his speed and his ability to score points. If he had a second driver worth anything, and Yuki Tsunoda also had another bad Belgium from a bad strategy call, which has been Red Bull's MO all year. More on that in a bit. But yeah, Yuki just out of sorts again. I don't think he scored points in 4, 5, 6 races now. He's just sort of useless. The rumor is they're going to drop him for 2026, and yeah, you kind of set him up for failure this year. It's not really fair to him, but it's what it is with Yuki. I always thought Yuki was he was a pay driver, but he was hyped up to sort of take a shot at Nick DeVries in 2023. Yuki in his third season wasn't anything special. It was towards the end of his third season you were starting to see something out of him, but the first half or even the first 18 races of 2023, he had like 2 or 3 points. One of which was a point at that nonsense Australia race in 2023, which saved his career, Piastri's career, Hulkenberg's career, and Zhou's career. If you look at the people who benefited from that, if you look at their points totals without what was classified, not finished, all those drivers could have been in trouble. Not Piastri. But early on, Piastri would have only been 1 point ahead of Nick DeVries, if not for that reclassification in Australia. But to bring back to my original point, Tsunoda was hyped up to push DeVries out because DeVries was a Marco call. He was something Marco really wanted at Racing Bulls, and Horner said, sure, whatever. And I think that was the start of the war between them, because it was shortly after Dietrich Mateschitz died. And Horner got a leg up on Marco's ability to deduce drivers. And Horner's like, yeah, that was your guy. Look how bad he is. And I think the media hyped up this battle between the two of them, and really there were only 2 or 3 points separating them. 2, actually, because Tsunoda got his third point at Spa where De Vries had already been dropped. Was it really worth giving up on De Vries for the rest of the season just because he was having some bad results? That car was not good. That was the last place car at the time. Give a rookie some more time. But yeah, Hamilton, great strategy to recover, but the rain delay, it's exactly what the drivers wanted. And I heard Max Verstappen after the race saying, yeah, it's a shame, but we talked about safer racing. I think after Silverstone, because of the wet, they said we don't want any spray. We don't want it to be dangerous. It's a dangerous track. A lot of people have died. Well, this is what you get. And F1 fans are going to be pissed, but this is your modern day driver. And for the most part, a lot of them are a bunch of pussies. I'm sorry to say this, Pierre Gasly, every time it rains, it's unsafe, red flag the race every single fucking time. Norris at the front with no spray saying, I don't know, its visibility's not very great. Piastri behind him with his spray saying, yeah, we can probably race. The majority, though, like the ones that I think they coddle, like the Gaslys, the Norrises, the Hamiltons, the Leclercs, the Alonso, well, I guess Alonso isn't included in that, but the younger ones, the Sainzes, they would probably be like, yeah, we don't want it to be safe. The Russells, we don't want it to be unsafe. We want to make sure everything's okay. We don't want to die. Like, this is red flag. We need to red flag this. And I think the ones like Verstappen, Piastri, Alonso, they were ready to go racing. Even probably Hamilton was too. Hamilton's not a pussy in the rain. He's been pretty good over the years. But this is what you get. You coddle a generation of drivers. You make this whole thing about unsafe driving, what's it called? Dangerous driving, all these penalties for dangerous driving over the years. All driving is dangerous driving in Formula One. In some way, you're going 300 kilometers an hour in most corners, through most straights, through some high-speed corners. Like, everything is dangerous driving. Yes, you are more likely to spin out. If you don't feel comfortable, do what Niki Lauda did in 77 at the Nürburgring. He pulled over. This is unraceable. I'm not going to risk my life. For the rest of us males, we would like to see racing, right? Like pole time in 2024 in the wet, 1:54. Sean and I were watching Belgium 98 in the wet, in the heavy wet. Michael Schumacher setting fastest laps in the race, not the pole. The race 1:51. Those were men then. 18 cars crashed on the first laps. They still went out and set those times. So this is what you get. And I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat, my conspiratorial brain. Remember, I don't speak for Sean. But in some way, I think F1 wanted this. They've been trying to talk down Spa for years. The cars are different now. It's a different type of race. What we saw, I thought it was pretty decent. I thought it was a decent race. You had a good fight with strategy for the front two. That's a lot of times what Spa is. You're not going to get always a lot of passing, depending on the type of race. But a lot of them feel they've outgrown Spa. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's hard to make money for F1, whereas they can just add another street track where they can make a lot of money, and Spa's on rotation, and this kind of justified it, right? We can't race there in the wet, and the wet would have been an amazing race. So let's just let it dry out for their quote-unquote safety, and we'll get the goal that we seeked. It's called goal seeking in economics, in trading, where you want a result. So big banks or big money funds will put a lot of money into a stock to say beforehand, tell everybody. It's also called front running. Well, they'll tell everybody beforehand, oh, this stock's going to go up. So they'll put a lot of money into it to watch the stock go up and tell everybody, look, it's going up, so everybody else buys the stock so then they can sell a profit. And that they're doing this in the reverse, in a sale type of way. They're saying, look how bad Spa is. Spa's bad. We've outgrown Spa. We're going to rotate Spa from now on. And then races like this kind of justified to say, see, that wasn't anything special. You're not going to miss it. And yeah, the cars are different. We may not need it anymore. It may not be the race we all thought it was, the race we all grew up with. I'm talking about the ones who grew up with the 90s and 2000s F1. Yeah, Spa's not going to have the same results anymore. It's not going to be the same type of race when the racing's different, when the cars are different. So don't expect the same results, but just appreciate it for what it is, for the beautiful track that it is. And it's a shame that they waited out the rain for safety. It's a shame that F2 drove a wetter race than F1. It's kind of ridiculous, but it's kind of what they asked for. Like, one time I'm understanding why the stewards did what they did. This is what Sean talked about all year with Ben Sulayem. The ones who hate the corruption and hate the bullshit from him have resigned. The ones who stayed are doing things to the letter of the law. You feel unsafe? Okay, we're going to give you the safe race you want. We're going to red flag the race until we can race it. They're doing things, the stewards and the race directors are doing things to the letter of the law to make the drivers happy, in the hopes that if the driver's happy, the drivers are happy, they'll be happy with Ben Sulayem again. But it's pissing us all off. And this political nonsense amongst Ben Sulayem, the race directors, the drivers, like Sean said, it's time for him to resign. It's time for a new regime in charge of Formula One, a new direction, a new presidency. But, otherwise we're going to get stuff like this. We're going to get delays in what could have been a potentially great race. So I'm not mad at F1. I'm not mad at the stewards. They did what they were hired to do, which is follow things to the letter of the law, right? It's upsetting, but it's not surprising. I'm not going to go off because we've talked about this a million times. So it is what it is. It was also the first race for Laurent Mekies at Red Bull, and we'll segue into the Hungarian Grand Prix with this because Red Bull had a horrible Hungarian Grand Prix. Finished 9th for Max Verstappen, and God knows where the fuck for Yuki Tsunoda. 17th, as I'm looking here. I'm looking at the results. Yeah, just slow, just overall slow. Yuki in qualifying was only within a tenth of Max, but it didn't do him any good. He was still in Q1. So not much improvement there. But I think Mekies, to me, is, and we're talking about Hungary now, I think Red Bull chose Mekies right away. And Sean said this too in the midseason recap. He said, what was surprising, not that they fired Horner, because we've been calling for that since the end of even in 2024, quite frankly, beginning of 2024. Horner probably should have resigned then. If he really loved his team, if he didn't love power, if he loved Red Bull like he claimed he did, or at least he seemed like he clung to behind the scenes, he clung to his creation. If you really loved it, you needed to set it free. You needed to leave because you had become a detriment to the team. The second you lost Newey, even before that, I remember I've talked about this before, the car started to fall apart with Newey there. But there was no solutions the second Newey left, the second Wheatley left, the second millions of personnel left. This team is not the same, but like Sean said, the surprise wasn't that Horner was fired. It was that Mekies was replaced him right away. And I quipped that episode. I said, he's failing upward. He was race director of strategy or strategy director for Ferrari in 2022, one of the worst seasons ever. They threw away the championship with strategy. They had the fastest car for most of the season. Threw it away. And he leaves when Binotto leaves and goes to, or he leaves a year later and goes to Racing Bulls at the end of 2023 and becomes their team principal after not improving Ferrari. And Racing Bulls in 2024 become a laughingstock with strategy. We even saw Daniel Ricciardo. Arguably, his career was ended mostly because of him, but his career is over because of those strategy calls. Got quite a few of them that didn't go his way, and now he's in charge of the senior Red Bull Racing right away. To me, that signals to the people who replaced him, we have someone we can control. We have a puppet. We have someone who's not smart enough or capable enough to take over the team because he fails everywhere he goes. So he's controlled. He's not going to be a Horner. He's not going to go off the he's not going to not toe the line. He's going to not do what's best for himself. He's going to do what's best for the people who put him there. He's going to stay in line. But for the most part, I think they recognize what's coming. Is that it's going to be a bad rest of the 2025. They've been out of the constructors for a long time. I think Max is definitely out of the drivers now. Well, he's been out for a while, since at least before Silverstone. I think Spain was the first or middle nail of the coffin. But they recognize it's going to be a bad rest of 2025, and then 2026 may not be that good. And that they can blame it all on him and fire him and start over and start a real rebuild with Max potentially leaving at the end of 2026. That's what I see with Mekis, because these first two races do not look good. Yeah, the previous part of the season brought you these results. It's not your fault, per se. But it's not much different, right? Nothing changed. There was no even bump. There's not even a bump to say, like, oh, look at the new person in charge. They already changed the culture here. No, nothing's changed. There's some big underlying problems there that he clearly can't fix, and I don't think he was hired to fix them. If Red Bull really wanted to start fixing things, they could start rebuilding now. But I still think they have an outside shot of being good in 2026, and they're like, okay, well, let's put someone who has some experience, just on the off chance that we come out good. He might know what to do, but I think more than likely they come out bad, and they just blame it all on him towards the end of 2026. Max probably leaves, and then they really start to find a team principal, which is what they would have done now if they were serious about rebuilding. Just have someone interim. Just have an interim person. Just have someone step into the duties, kind of like at Alpine. That's exactly what Alpine's doing, because they're trying to rebuild. They don't think 2026 is the launch pad. They think 2026 is the start of new results, and we'll build from there. We have a good shot to be in a good position in 2026 with potentially good Mercedes engines. We'll start figuring out our aero as that build comes on. That's not what you're seeing at Red Bull. It's more desperation. It's more, can we be good? Can this guy with experience do anything? And if not, we just throw him out. And so far, it's not very good. You finished behind the Racing Bulls of Liam Lawson, of all people at Hungary. And that's really all I'm going to say about that for Red Bull. But what a great race Hungary was. I was actually surprised at how great it was. You had a legitimate race. You had two different strategies, and you had at the top between Norris and Piastri, and you had a lot of different diverse strategies throughout the field. You saw Charles Leclerc be really fast at the beginning and lose the pace as the race went on. The strategy didn't help and end up finishing fourth. Tried to kill Russell too, which shows that George Russell is hated and felt that he is inferior throughout the entire paddock, not just by Max Verstappen. You had the Aston Martins come out of nowhere and have a good race. Fernando Alonso 5th, Lance Stroll 7th, getting back into the swing of things. I think they're up there now. Just give me 1 second. Let's see. But yeah, the Aston Martins, you have them now in 7th, I believe, right? They're making their way back up. It just seemed kind of hopeless at the beginning. 6th at the moment, just ahead, 1 point ahead of Sauber, which quite the surprise there too. But Aston Martin reestablishing themselves as a mid-level team, only 18 points behind Williams. They may end up finishing 5th again if they keep this up. You may be seeing some results from Newey's input in the team. I don't know what's going on there. Maybe they always had this pace and they just finally had a good race, or they just got lucky. We will see as the season goes on. But and I think this is the best you're going to get from Fernando Alonso now. I don't know why people seem to think he's still a champion in the right car. when he had the right car, he wasn't a champion. So anyway, Gabriel Bortoleto coming sixth, and he's arrived. I talked about this with Spa quickly, but patience has paid off for this kid. He's there. Now, he's one of the better rookies. And I speaking of Alonso, I do agree with him saying one thing at the end of the race. He said if Bortoleto was British, we'd be hearing all about this kid. I think there's something to that. I think there's something to that comment, right? Like Oliver Bierman last year finishes 7th in a race-winning Ferrari and is talked about for the rest of the season until he gets a seat. And this season he's been great. Finished a 10th a bunch of times. One that turned into an 8 after disqualifications. So that's good, right? I'm on embargo talking about him, but I think I've kind of nailed. This is just off the record. I think I've kind of nailed my synopsis of him, but we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. Well, maybe he comes alive in the second half of the season, but doubt it. So yeah, he's there. He's here now. He's coming alive, Gabriel Bortoleto. He's one of the higher scoring rookies now, considering his car's garbage. He's navigated this lull really well, whereas Hadjar's kind of fallen off, Antonelli's fallen off, Behrman, anyway. Lawson is hitting a stride too, but in a better car and only really 2 points ahead of Bortoleto. I think sky's still the limit for Bortoleto. Colapinto and Doohan. Yeah. But Bortoleto, patience pays off. Let kids develop. Don't now turn around. I think Kicksauber, I think they said in the paddock, Bortoleto had a horrible attitude all weekend. He was an asshole. We hate him. He just crashes the car all the time. Because remember, Bortoleto crashed quite a bit early on in the season. Oh, no, they didn't say any of that. They said, good job, Gabriel. Coming alive, and we have full support, and we're excited to see where you go with this. It's interesting that when you treat the F2 winner with respect and the belief that he can become something instead of comparing him to Kevin Magnussen. Nico Hulkenberg. Just comparing him to people who've been there 10 years prior and had worse crashes. Kevin Magnussen. When you don't do that, you actually get something. And I'm very happy to see that Bortoleto. I called that preseason. I said of all of them, he had the most potential. And I was wrong about Hadjar the most, but I believed his attitude would hinder him, and I was wrong. And I've admitted I was wrong about Hadjar. As for the rest of them, I was right, and it is what it is now. Bortoleto, there's something there, and he came alive, and we'll see. I'm excited to see where he goes the rest of the season. I hope he doesn't rest on this. Unlike his teammate, who after Silverstone, I said, okay, don't let this podium get to your head and keep going. Keep showing us what you're made of. And you proceeded to finish 13th in Hungary and 17th and spelled Belgium and 19th in the... Anyway, Hulkenberg, I wonder if that's it for him. I wonder if the monkey was off his back, and now we're just going to see good old 16th place Nico, as he's known. But yeah, the big. But moving on now, switching gears, the big talk about Hungary. Once again, great race, fun to watch. Great to see Oscar hunt down Lando on an extra pit stop. The main talk of Hungary is suddenly P1's Matt and Tommy, the race, which I'm going to talk about in a sec. TheRace.com, Formula1.com going, why is Oscar just not favored in strategy? Why does McLaren always seem to pick Lando to get the best strategy calls? What? I thought that was a baseless conspiracy theory. I thought there was nothing against them. I thought McLaren was just navigating two good drivers all year. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I've been calling this one all season. So I am going to take a victory lap on this and then disagree for this race. But I'm going to take a victory lap on this first to remind everybody that in Australia, Oscar was slowed down for Lando's benefit, and much to Oscar's detriment, who can end up coming ninth instead of winning the race. Add 23 points to Oscar's tally, and you have a 32-point gap right there going into the summer break. There was a lot of talk about, the importance of being up 23 for Oscar going into the summer break. Yeah, what if he was up 32? Yeah, interesting. Slowed down in Japan, that's another 6-point swing. That's 38. Oscar was told not to pass Lando even though he was faster. Slowed down. Hold position. Interesting. Very interesting. Then when Oscar is championship leader by a lot, he's told to race, Lando was told to race Oscar at Canada when they could have just stopped him. Once again, I've been talking about this all season. Why isn't it to Oscar's benefit? Oscar's catching Antonelli in front of him, could finish third. Why wouldn't they tell Lando to hold position, let Antonelli or let Oscar catch Antonelli, and then you can both race after for third? No. Lando hits the back of Oscar, almost ruins both their races. And Lando, if he didn't do that, by the way, once again, Nick being proven right, Lando would be up a point going into the summer break. Austria. Oscar is told, Oscar, who is racing Lando for 20 laps early on, is trying to pass him. And Lando dives into the pits. Oscar says, okay, I'm going to do a hot lap and come to the pits right after. No, Oscar, you're not going to do that. You're going to stay out 4 laps for some reason, or 5 laps, and then you're going to get back at him later. Against Oscar's wishes. Why? Why aren't you giving the championship leader by a lot what he wants? Why didn't the race and Formula1.com, P1's Matt and Tommy, Lavies, why didn't they all talk about it then? Where was that then? Oscar could have won Austria instead of having to get slowed down by Franco Colapinto, his only contribution of this season. And then Silverstone, yeah. Oh, by the way, if you add Austria, if Austria is, with the points totals, is added to Oscar's spread, it's a 14-point swing. Oscar's up 52 points. Just rough calculations here going into summer break. Lando was down, 70-some-odd points last year going in with Max with a superior car going into the summer break. And they blew, or I think it was actually like 68 or something like that. And they said, oh, watch, Lando's going to catch him. Would Lando catch Oscar with a similar car? Yeah, anyway. It's just funny enough, I'm just doing all this background, and I haven't even added Silverstone, which would be another 14 points on the 52, which would be 66. But anyways, who's keeping track here? All this, though, to say that Lando Norris did an amazing job in Hungary. Lando won that race. Lando stole a race. He absolutely did what he needed to do. In his middle stint, on his one stop, he took a huge a huge amount of time out of Oscar's gap and set himself up to have position for the last 10 laps and held off Oscar for 10 laps, defended very well instead of crashing out. He almost cried himself out of the win, and it annoyed the hell out of me when he's like, oh, traffic's going to slow me down. They're going to ruin my race. I'm going to lose the Hungarian Grand Prix because of traffic. If you watch that, I think it's lap like 56 or something, or 58, and you're just like, shut the fuck up. You're supposed to be the alpha dog. You're supposed to be the guy who, remember in 2023, you mostly, but a lot of other people said in the same car as Max, he'd kick his ass. The only reason Max is winning is because of his car. Yes and no. Sort of. The car that's tuned for Max, that Max helped develop, that Max made that good. Lando's been at this team for 7-8 years now, and this is the best he's got? Do you need to slow Oscar down a bunch of races for him to be 9 points behind going into the summer break with 10 races left? Yeah, that's all that was missing with you, Lando, was the car, not your attitude, not your general ability, not your general attire. But that has nothing to do with anything. That stupid smug look on your face, this is going to be my year. That's what really pisses me off about all this, and that's what my conspiratorial brain telling me why McLaren does favor him at times over Oscar's, because he declared it, and McLaren probably went, shit! They probably all knew Oscar was going to win this year, but Lando said, it's going to be my year, and they said, okay, you know what? You've been at this team longer. We're going to give you every chance you have to show that this is your year. And what does he do? Disappears in qualifying in Hungary. Needs to have an offsetting strategy because he's a distant fourth throughout the race. Gets a one-stopper from his team, gets the green light, which was a Hail Mary. Did a great job to win the race and hold off Oscar. He did a great job. But he showed that he needs to run his own race. He cannot beat Oscar straight up. He cannot beat Max straight up. Max has an inferior car at the moment. Probably can't even beat Leclerc and Russell straight up. Probably could, because I think they both suck. You switch Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris, and the exact same results happen. Leclerc's behind Piastri, and Norris is completely non-existent most of the season, complaining about everything. You switch, swear to God, 2025, if Norris started at Ferrari and Leclerc started at McLaren, this exact same thing would be happening right now. They both have the same defeatist type of attitude where it's everybody else's fault. They don't have the solution for anything. They've been at their respective teams for 7-8 years now, and they have offered precisely fuck all for solutions. But they're the best as far as they've been concerned. Fastest one-lap guy, one-lap driver on the grid, Charles Leclerc. Yeah, sure. Lando Norris, future champion, what Will Buxton called it, Drive to Survive. Yeah, that's... Yeah. Well, we'll see. McLaren's going to have to probably kneecap Tanya Harding-style Oscar Piastri. Give me that medal, you French horse! If anybody knows Robin Williams. But all that being said, this is not the race where Lando was favored. It was a Hail Mary. He had no other chance. They said, okay, Lando, if you really want to try and win the race, this is all you got. Can you do it? Everybody believed what Oscar's strategy was the favorable strategy. So why are they bringing this up now? Is the media, like, this is my thought, the media sometimes muddies the waters of certain issues in a way to marginalize them, so that they bring up a discussion at the wrong time to control the narrative and to marginalize what people like me have been saying, which is that if you let Oscar run rampant, you would have one hand on the driver's title. It just wouldn't be Lando. And you've already had the constructors for a long time, but it would just be a clear, easy season the rest of the way. You could just rally behind Oscar. This idea that you can just let them fight it out for your benefit, it's sort of working. It's only working this season because every other team sucks. And you may be doing it for F1's sake. F1 is probably really happy about this for ratings' sake. They have a title fight where realistically there shouldn't be one. So that's probably part of the reason why McLaren's doing it. I can't imagine they were given orders by F1, but I can't imagine F1's upset either. Like I said to Sean after Silverstone, I said when people know the game, they play it without even having to be told sometimes. So I think McLaren maybe foresaw a title fight for good ratings, and Zach Brown is a ratings whore, trying to up the value of F1 in North America, and then he's doing that with this title fight. So that's maybe why they're favoring Lando at times. But this was not the race. This time, actually, Lando Norris earned this win. Oscar was given favorable strategy. It just didn't work out. He just couldn't get past Lando. Lando held him off well, drained his battery, did whatever he had to do. Maybe McLaren did hesitate Oscar's pit by a couple laps. I remember seeing that while I was watching TV, but I don't think they did that on purpose. I think Oscar thought he had more time on those tires, and it was too late by then. Mistakes like that do happen. But why bring this up now? It's been going on well before this. This was not the race to bring this up. Why are they all talking about it now? Why are they all making me look like a genius now? I don't know. I wonder what your opinions are. My opinions, what I just said, I think F1 wants to see a title fight. I think McLaren recognizes that they can deliver it, and I think they're doing it. I think Lando opened his big, fat, stupid mouth at the end of last season, and Zach Brown believes Lando's his boy, believes Lando's the real focal point of this team, and doesn't want to give up on the idea that Oscar's better yet. Maybe they thought Lando would win this year and Oscar would win the rest. That's why they extended Oscar in Australia and still haven't extended Lando, if we're all paying attention here. Oscar's at this team longer than Lando. This is just my opinion. This is my theory. And as for the sporting, which was talked about in the comment, sporting of it all, let's not just have the talk like I said, and sit a driver down and say, Lando, you're number 2 now. Oscar's winning this title. And focus on Oscar. The reason they didn't have the talk was more sporting. They want to let it play out. They want to just give both of them the chance to win when really they've had to slow down Oscar. The reason you don't do that is actually from something that the race brought up this week in one of their articles. And for every 14 or 15 articles the race has that are all terrible, they do produce one good article every now and then. I read most of them because I'm an idiot. Should get a life. But they brought up 2007 McLaren, a situation where they let both drivers compete against each other. Rookie Lewis Hamilton, a arrogant Fernando Alonso who believed he was going to go to the best car at the time, and soon realized right away that he was a total fraud because a rookie in the same car eclipsed him. And kudos to Lewis. Lewis back then was a badass. He's not the baby whiny bitch he is now. More on that in a bit. But it left the door open for a Ferrari driver's title. Yes, you won the constructors and then lost it because of Spygate. But because you were competing against each other, at times you took each other out. You took each other off the road. You messed up your strategies trying to compete with each other and open the door for a Kimi Räikkönen win, which is something I believed was going to happen this year. I predicted it preseason, remember? And if it weren't for the ineptitude of Red Bull that I talked about earlier, Max would have probably 6 wins right now. Some bounces didn't go their way. Spa and Britain, right? They chose the wrong setup in Spa, chose the wrong setup in Silverstone, and tried that setup again in Spa, and one was waited to have the rain end, and one had the rain continue forever, and it just didn't bounce their way. In Silverstone or Spa, that's arguably 2 wins Max would have had there. Australia, they blew the pit stop strategy. We talked about that a million times. Lost that race. Spain, they threw in the garbage. That's 4 wins. Yeah, Max is probably still not in the lead in the driver's title for inconsistency purposes. There's other races where they messed up the strategy. Max could have had a podium instead of a 4th or 5th. But it's a lot closer, especially if Max has 6 wins. Oscar would have 5, Lando would have 2 or 1. Who fucking knows? Who cares? A door like that is open. That's why you pick someone. Because what happened next year? McLaren won when Lewis Hamilton was the guy and who was their second driver? Fernando Alonso? Felipe Massa? No. Heikki Kovalainen, who ended up winning 1 race his entire career. It's always the Finns who become good second drivers. That's why you have the talk. Like our listeners and Sean are ganging up on me and saying that's why it's okay to let them race. Not necessarily. If there was any other team available, they would have left the door open for someone to take the title from them. And yeah, so it's important. I would read that report by the race, the 2007 corollary to right now. McLaren doesn't believe that's happening right now, but it easily could have. And what if Red Bull or Ferrari turn it on? Okay, well, Ferrari's not turning it on. That's too little, too late. But what if Max turns it on for the rest of the season? Wins almost every race. It can happen, and you guys fall apart. You're squabbling with each other. You might take each other out from time to time. It's something to think about. But yeah, why are they talking about Lando being favored now when he actually earned this race win? It's odd to me. What do you guys think? What do you think happened there? Why are they bringing this up now? I don't know. It's curious. Maybe we'll talk about it more when Sean comes back. The other news of the weekend was after Hamilton finishing 12th and just completely out of nowhere, out of sorts, and all of Hungary, you had Lewis Hamilton just say, "I'm useless," and really just show that like his mentality's gone now at Ferrari. Ferrari has broke him in a lot of ways, and it's a damn shame because we talked about it preseason, Sean and I, about how this really isn't his spot. That didn't make sense for Lewis to go to Ferrari. Didn't make sense for Lewis to drop everything, go to a team that really needed him. He really thought this situation was going to be something else. He thought he was just going to go to another fast car and win really easily, and the car will be made great for him to be a great driver. And he's realizing that this is not that team. This is really not that team. This team you need to take control of. We've been talking about this with Charles Leclerc. Charles Leclerc cannot take control of this team because he doesn't understand what he needs to do. He doesn't understand why he has to... He doesn't understand how Michael Schumacher was. And Lewis Hamilton seems to think he's Michael Schumacher. Seems to think he's as good, but he doesn't realize now that all the things Michael did to get this team up, and Sean and I have talked about it a million times, were something that Lewis Hamilton never bothered to nurture in his Formula One strengths and racing abilities. He never bothered to do the work. They always talked about, oh, he's never in the simulator. So he would have never been at the track like Michael was 12 hours a day trying to make that car better. He's always modeling. He's always on TV shows. He's always on Hot Ones. He's always at the Met Gala. He's not working. Michael was working. Michael was working to be a champion. Michael was working to make his car better. Lewis has never been that guy. That's the guy you have to be at Ferrari. And I think Lewis is realizing it. Like, you sat there and just relied on your pure speed or whatever it was, or pure talent, and just went from the best car to the best car until you found it. Hit a good situation in 2014 where Mercedes was way ahead of everybody else, and you dominated 6 of 7 years. But then the second you had competition again, you fell apart. And this is what he has to realize now. He has to become a driver that he's not now. And he only has half a season to turn this season around. And then he has to start configuring out 2026. And he's been talking to like, yeah, I've made sure I've put my stamp on the 2026 car, but it might be too little too late, Lewis. And I don't know. And there's a lot of talk in the background, a lot of reports I'm reading that they've just decided to shift development towards Charles. Yeah, well, good luck with that, Ferrari. Yeah. Not going to talk about their bullshit again for the millionth time. But Lewis, I think this has been a real reality check for him. And he might realize at the end of 2026, maybe even at the end of this year, he's not the guy he thought he was. He's not the guy he needs to be. And I really feel sorry for him because I wanted to see him succeed here. I did. Not necessarily a driver's title. I never thought that was going to happen, but at least better than Leclerc. I kind of was hoping he would come in and show Leclerc like, oh, yeah, you've been wasting Ferrari's time for 7 years, and he still has. Let's not get that twisted. Charles Leclerc still is garbage for what Ferrari needs. He's a decent driver. He belongs in F1. But I didn't expect him Charles to eclipse Lewis like this. And you're only getting older, Lewis, and we talked about this preseason, so it does not look good going forward. I'm intrigued to see if he can become what he needs to be. A hardworking, no-nonsense, just put in the work and see the results type of guy. He's never been that guy. He's never had the ability to help a car develop forward. He's taken a great car and driven it well. But you're going to a team that has no idea what a good car is. They find it from time to time. But the ones who really last there and really do the great work there are the ones who can build their own car, like Michael, like Lauda. You can't be Kimi Räikkönen and expect to just win all the time at Ferrari. No, it goes wrong, and you're seeing that, aren't you, Lewis? Anyways, I wonder what Sean thinks about that. I'd be intrigued to hear what he says, but we'll find out. I'm just going to respond to a comment, and then I'm going to end this episode. I was going to talk a little about the Cadillac news, but I think I'll make that its own episode. This is from Joseph Adeniran C14. Commented to our F1 Philosophies British Grand Prix recap, the good. He said, this is, okay. There was no British bias for Lando is what he's saying. And I'm saying this as a Piastri fan. I don't know about that. He also said, and I should point out that Alonso was in the points. So yeah, Sean and I did get that wrong. We just were all over in our recap. We forgot that Alonso did get a bad strategy call in Britain. And thank you, Joseph, for pointing that out. And he did also point out that I will admit you're right about Hamilton 2021. I don't like him. I think he's the most overrated driver who had a 2023 Red Bull level car for too long. Yeah, I've been saying that for years, Joseph, and I completely agree with you. Thank you for the comment. You said 2021 was an embarrassment for him. Yeah, he needed the best car. He had to tune his engine for the last 4 races just for him to be in the discussion. Otherwise, Max would have wrapped it up halfway through the season. And it's come out now since that Max went through that entire 2021 season, or the second half at least, in Silverstone, with brain damage, essentially. Max, every time he went to a high-speed corner, he almost passed out. Almost lost consciousness because his head was shaking in a certain way. Hamilton almost killed him at Silverstone and should have been disqualified. And Max still pulled up his sleeves, didn't complain once, didn't tell anybody he was injured, and won that title. Hamilton did make an ass of himself that year, I think. It's safe to say, but whatever. We'll let our listeners decide that. But you say there's no British bias for Lando. I forgot to bring this up in the recap because I was so heated. But I just have a question for everybody. If Max Verstappen was in second when Oscar got the penalty, or when Oscar got the penalty. Yeah, Oscar got the penalty when Lando was in second. But if Max was in second, does Oscar get a 10-second penalty? And it's just a question to ask everybody. Does something like that happen? It's a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer it, but just something to think on. If Max Verstappen is in second place, will the FIA give Oscar Piastri that 10-second penalty? I think you all know the answer because you saw it a couple weeks before in Canada. Yes, as Sean pointed out in that episode, it was clarified that you don't brake a certain way behind the safety car, and Oscar was unfortunate to get the first precedent penalty on it. But Max, there was no penalty for Russell when Max was in second, if Max could have benefited. It was who benefits. Chi bono, who benefits. That's why I think there was British bias, because the only person who benefited from that was Lando. Nobody learned a thing. Even Max said that was a very harsh penalty. A whole bunch of other people have done it over the years. Why now? Why did they wait to give the penalty? This is something else I forgot to bring up. After Oscar was 5 seconds ahead of Lando. Why wasn't it a 5-second penalty? And does Lando drive the same way he does and close the gap if he knows Oscar doesn't have a penalty or only has a 5-second penalty? No, I don't think so. It gave Lando mental clarity the rest of the race to just know I just have to drive, and nothing will go wrong, and I'll win the race. Chi bono, who benefits? So Joseph Adeniran C4T, thank you for the comment. I disagree a little bit. It's just more me being more conspiratorial. I agree with everything else you said in that comment about Alonso, about Hamilton. But just ask yourself, does that penalty happen if Max is in second? Why did they wait till Oscar was 5 seconds ahead to give a 10-second penalty? I just think it's something worth asking. Anyways, thank you, Joseph. I hope more of you comment on our podcast in the future. And that's been our Hungary and Spa recap. I kept it in an hour. I'm pretty proud of myself, so half an hour each. So F1philosophypod@gmail.com and F1_philosophy at Instagram, F1philosophy at YouTube and Spotify. Some more videos are coming up. I hope you comment on what I had to say for these recaps, or do you disagree with anything I've said? Please leave a comment on our videos. I'd like to know. Thank you guys for engaging with us more. We really love doing this, and when Sean gets back, he'll definitely say that. But in the meantime, for now, you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll talk to you about Formula One when Formula One comes back at the end of August. Good night, everybody.